Hello there. It's Shannon, the integrative counselor, back again for another trauma informed, trauma trained, trauma survived video on some of the nonsensical, minimizing, and re traumatizing collective statements that are said to trauma survivors. So today I'm going to address like two statements around a lot of one of the statements is individuals that they often will say to themselves around trauma is like, I just have to get over it, which parallels the collective statement of just suck it up. Let's suck it up and move on, as if our nervous system didn't experience or the things doesn't happen. Especially if this is happening in systems and families and cultures and in communities where there's a lot of bypassing, minimizing, gaslighting, and validation and emotional immaturity. So we can't just get over trauma. If that was possible, people would be doing it because trauma sucks. It sucks big time, and we don't just get over it. Trauma actually changes our brain. It changes our biology. It changes our posture. It changes our health. It changes our personality. It changes every aspect of our being, including the beliefs that we have about ourselves, and including, oh my gosh, I mean, every aspect of your well being and expression of humanity is impacted by trauma. And trauma happens to anyone. It can happen to very smart individuals. Trauma doesn't discriminate in that way. Trauma doesn't care how resourced you are, even in some instances, because it can just happen. Of course, if we are more resourced, typically on the other side of trauma, there's less exacerbation or a prolonged occurring of trauma, and sometimes trauma is what doesn't happen um, after the either if it's a one event or with complex trauma, the interpersonal long-term nature of childhood trauma, emotional trauma, domestic violence, wars, um, cults, high demand religions, racism, ableism, the things that were the LGBT Q plus community is experiencing as far as legislation, just body control, trying to control aspects of humanity which are traumatic, and we don't culturally, especially in Western society, this is so pervasive, especially for men, especially for men. And especially for just it's such a minimizing statement when it's like just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get it together, tough it out. Like these are sayings that are so pervasive in our culture, to the point where of course folks self gaslight themselves, especially if they are interpersonally very connected to systems and people that are explaining this to ourselves, because this is how our self-talk, our internal chatter, it is programmed by what we hear around us, especially from age 0 to 7. From age 0 to 7, from birth until 7, our subconscious is programmed by those closest to us. And so this is why some of your inner tormentors are the voices of your abusers. And trauma also can happen at any age. So if you may happen, some of the inner torment and the self gaslighting can happen in a romantic relationship in adulthood, or if you're in a high demand religion, or experiencing racism, sexism, ableism, transphobia, in a lot of the forms of hatred that are coming through today, of othering. And trauma is the nature of othering, because trauma is chronic disconnection from self, from others, from spirit, from community, from the world. That's one definition of trauma. There are so many. And so today I come to you just explaining a little bit more. I try to post things on social media, little posts. I am a sometimes professor at universities, And I kind of joke about any single post that I write. I could give an entire, I teach an entire semester about that topic. And so, unfortunately, with time constraints, I am a person. I'm a real life person. Yes, I know, weird. Real life person with a life and a nervous system and my own trauma history. And if I post a couple words on the internet, that's not going to cut it ever. And so please know that that's just a tidbit, and also take what's for you and leave what's the rest. That's not for you, right? Unless I'm working one-on-one with you, this content may not be for you. I hope to educate the collective a little bit more. I am, again, someone that teaches at the master's and at the doctoral and at the continue ed levels on these topics, and have been a research fellow that has written policy and things like that. And so, yeah, I can get a little long in the tooth explaining some of these concepts because it's really important. Because what are you saying when you're telling someone to just kind of suck it up and just move on it? You are in the moment. You are invalidating their experience. um, that's in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, you can be re-traumatizing them, because trauma is not only, it's often defined as an event. It's not that. Trauma is your nervous system not processing in the very moment. So going into freeze and staying in freeze because something was frightening or overwhelming. So another definition of trauma is something happening too much, too fast, too soon. But we also are missing a huge piece of also what causes trauma. Also, what causes trauma is what does or does not happen after the experience of trauma. So, when someone is, and this is on all of us, because all of us are on the after event of someone's traumatic experience or complex trauma, meaning long term, usually interpersonal nature of trauma, such as childhood trauma, such as being in a cult, such as racism, such as ableism, such as domestic violence, such as anything that's inescapable, that goes on for a long period of time, a death by 1,000 cuts, right? So there are thousands of experiences of minimization, of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, that are happening in those interpersonal relationships. And that's the nature of trauma, which causes extreme nervous system dysfunction and protection. And then parts are created out of this, and so subpersonalities are created out of this. So part of me is feeling this and a part of me is feeling this. They can be really at odds. That's the nature of trauma, because the experience hasn't been metabolized through the body. That's why I teach somatics, because that's one of the ways that we heal. And so today I come up with another spicy teaching. There's a video that I made that's on the YouTube channel right before this one that gives you a model to shut the fuck up and listen when you don't have training or experience or know how to hold space for someone that's sharing some of their trauma history. Listening is an art form, and it is so healing to be able to listen to someone and being non-judgmental, being open, and being willing to let that person teach you about what it is, kind of even a touch of what the experience is like to be them. Because, oh boy, the words don't even touch on the visceral nature of trauma. It is so deep that even individuals that can tell the most articulate stories of their trauma history can be pervasively suffering inside. Okay, and you may never know. Sometimes it's the strongest people that you have no clue as to how deep the suffering goes. So I welcome you to notice when you are minimizing yourself or being very unrealistic about healing from trauma, because we don't just heal by thinking about healing, by trying harder. In fact, we probably have to go the other way, and we've got to get some support. That's just the nature. That's the nature of healing. We can't do it all alone. We can do some things alone, of course, but we can't heal our trauma by ourselves. Okay, we're never meant to heal alone. We're never, and that is pervasive in the Western world, is that we heal individually, alone, by ourselves. No, no, no. That's not how we heal. Healing is also to be witnessed in the process of the messy, nonlinear process and I see a lot more group healing and collective and community and ancestral healing, and that's so wonderful. I love that so much because it's needed. Because there's like three parts to the healing process when it comes to processing. It's your own individual processing, understanding. Maybe it's reading video or watching videos. Maybe it's reading. Maybe it's learning through podcasts. Maybe it's doing like an ancestral review if you can with your kin or your culture to understand what the trauma responses that are living within your body, as these things are inherited and passed on through dysfunctional systems, family, or even cultural. Because one of these minimizing statements comes through Western culture of just suck it up, right? America was founded on pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and then what if someone doesn't even have boots, right? Like we have a really hard time understanding um, that within American culture, and because there's so many reasons for that. That's for a whole other video. Um, like I said, I could go deep and long on these topics and put you to sleep, or maybe for a person that's really into this information, maybe help them understand. However, this is meant to be a short video, and hopefully you can understand a little bit better about the ways that you are part of the culture. The collective unconscious is lives within our body. Okay, so what's said in the collective, or what's said within the family system, what's said within the workplace system, what's said within the church system, what's in the community system, what's said within the healthcare system, a systems. As being a systems person, we have to look at that's also lives within us, and so and understand all of these systems that I named and those that are unnamed, all of the systems, most of those are not trauma trained and trauma informed or culturally competent. And 100% of them are not tailored to understanding your experience. Because, our world is waking up to trauma, and oh boy, is it messy. Oh, but all of evolution is messy. We're waking up to trauma and trying to understand it all. I wrote today about one of the things that I'm seeing is the misperception and confusion around trauma and stress, and a lot of folks are equating them as the same thing, and they're not the same thing. So there's a lot of opportunities right now to educate on what is what. And one of the things is to understand that the collective unconscious sometimes can live within us, and especially with a trauma history. Trauma brain's a real thing. Like trauma creates executive dysfunction, right? Because a lot of your energy units are used up in trauma physiology. Let's say you have 100 units of energy a day. Someone without a trauma history, they're using up their 100 units of energy and thriving and living and working and playing and being, right? Someone with a trauma history, they've got 75, 90 units tied up in trauma physiology just to function, just to kind of get through the day, function, and maybe collapse at the end of the day. And because they've only have, 15 or 25 units of energy. I love the spoon theory because this very much represents what it is like to live with chronic illness, and can be so applicable to trauma, which can be disabling because of the level of just internal processes that one has to, oh my gosh, shapeshift and move through just to kind of be a person, and it takes a lot of energy. Definitely can take a lot of energy, and that's why just chronic fatigue, right? It's just so common, and then just feeling, oh my gosh, just so exhausted a lot of the times. And a lot of the times, even under the hypervigilance, is a deep pervasive exhaustion. And so we want to be really clear too with the understanding that the collective is also a part of us, and that's also how we can minimize our own and say, well, I should be able to suck it up. No, that is not how trauma processing works, okay? We don't just suck it up. We don't just think positive thoughts. We don't just vibe higher. Our body is literally keeping the score, okay? Which changes how our brains think, which changes how we cognitively think, how we sit, how we stand, how we move, our health expressions. Trauma is a silent killer because it creates all of these mental health conditions and physical health conditions. And if we don't get underneath what is causing the epigenetic levers to be turning on and expressing even back generation, wow, I'm having a hard time with that word, generations in the past. So I'm going to keep this video up. I'm a real live person, and I do make mistakes. So even generationally, this is why sometimes epigenetic levers. Now I'm not gonna. It's not, again. Please don't misunderstand this. I'm not saying this is all of the time. I'm not saying trauma causes everything. I am not saying that because there is so much nuance and so much richness and oh my gosh, so much to really know and understand that I am not so silly that I'm gonna just put that on the internet very carelessly because it's so complex. Complex trauma is complex. Can you believe that? But what's not complex is the fact that we do need support. Okay, and there's a lot of ways that we can get that support, and there's a lot of different. There's many roads to Rome. Okay, I practice in one type of way, and there's all types of ways. Whatever works for you, I'm just going to be a huge fan of. Because there's so many ways to heal, and in this and now in this time there are actual trauma processing modalities. Most of them are ancestral and indigenous practices that are shamanic, and even most of the trauma healing practices are the way. Why? Because we have to be in a non-ordinary state of consciousness to heal. We have to be in a higher state of consciousness than the consciousness as to which we incurred the trauma. Okay, and so that's just the nature of how all trauma healing works, just across the board. And there's also the real world skills, right? Because we have to some of the things too is like having housing, having food, having employment. All of these other things have to come into play, or else someone with a trauma history is more likely to be re-traumatized. Okay, and this also goes back generations. I have PTSD. There are actually PTSD genes, PTSD, yes, genes, and I have them. They're turned on, right? Because there's intergenerational trauma that was turned on and activated before I came into being, and so I'm more likely, as I experience trauma, I'm more likely to have PTSD, and that's a real thing, and that's and all for all health conditions. Trauma changes our metabolism. Trauma changes our hormones. Trauma changes, brain processes. All things, it's all really connected. Our body is a symphony, and if one instrument's out of tune, trauma can impact that. And so we can't just think positive vibes and muscle our way through trauma healing, because it doesn't work that way. It absolutely does not work that way. And please don't let the culture define this for you, because the culture is dysfunctional. All right, look around. How are we doing? How's it going? It's not going great. Okay, and the culture's not trauma informed, and so two of those things, it's things are not going well. The culture is not trauma informed. The third and most important thing, it's not you. The culture isn't you, so it's not the nuances, the uniqueness to your experience also impact you. Trauma is there's so many layers and nuances to trauma. There are trauma responses, there are hybrid responses, there are responses that can shift from one scenario to a next based on the very most minute thing, a color, a smell, a scent, a situation, a thought, a feeling, allostatic load levels, anything happening in, on, or around in the environment. That's neuroception. And so there's a lot going on. And oh boy, if there's someone out there trying to sell you a real simple solution, discernment, because drinking all of the hot lemon water in the morning is not a simple solution to healing trauma. That's a way to get some water in your body, which dehydration, right, like that can cause some mood symptoms, but it's not the end all and be all, right? So we've got to honor our own individual process, and your process, your unique process, your soul song, your medicine is going to be unique to you. And there's also some universal things, right? And I hope to teach some universal truths, which the universal truth is going back full circle. We cannot suck it up, and we cannot just let it go. We can't just, if our bodies, if it was as simple to let it go, our bodies would have done that, right? If we could think positive thoughts and vibe higher, our bodies would have done that. Our bodies are not meant to do that. Our bodies are, through trauma programs our bodies to orient to what is familiar. And with trauma, a lot of times what's familiar is dysfunctional and trauma, survival. Okay, so we're going to orient towards what's familiar, not what is going to help us thrive. And we're going to replay unconsciously. Trauma is unconscious. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Trauma is playing out unconsciously. The past playing in the present. The flavors of the past playing on the present and projected out to the future, just constantly. Okay. It's also a privilege to heal because for some folks with complex trauma histories, in the society that we have today with ableism and racism and all of this othering that we have, these hate groups against certain individuals, I can't promise that someone can get to a wholeness level when they may be re-traumatized minutes after us working together by the nature of our dysfunctional world. And that is why I hope that I can educate more so we can mind our own business and maybe just shut the fuck up if we don't understand someone's lived experience. Maybe shut the news off, read some trauma books, get some exposure to folks, go volunteer. Please get some exposure to individuals that have different backgrounds than you and have trauma histories. If you think that someone can just let trauma go and suck it up, I'd really like you to understand what someone's lived experience is, to understand that, because you've not met enough people to be thinking that way. I'm so sorry, because that is not the reality of a lot of folks living with trauma.